Some books, they're not just history, are they? They're a warning. Today, we're going to dive into a real classic, John Kenneth Galbraith's The Great Crash 1929. It is an incredible story of financial disaster, of human psychology, and it has these lessons that just echo with startling clarity, even today. So let's get into it and explore why this book is so much more than history. It's a critical warning for our own time.
But here's the thing. To really get this book, our story isn't going to start in 1929. Nope. It starts, believe it or not, in 1955. And it starts with Galbraith himself, caught in this moment of just unbelievable historical irony.
So picture this. It's March 1955, and Galbraith gets his big moment to be, as he puts it, an oracle. He's been called to testify before the U.S. Senate. And with his typical wit, he points out that, pretty much everyone, including him, kind of enjoys that feeling of being the expert in the room.
So what's going on? Well, it's a hearing with the Senate Committee on Banking and Currency. And the big topic of the day? A booming stock market that was making some very powerful people very, very nervous. The question on everyone's mind was, could another 1929 be just around the corner?
So if you're the Senate and you're worried about another 29, who are you going to call? Yeah, exactly. The guy who literally wrote the book on it. Galbraith shows up as the star expert witness, with the proofs of his soon-to-be-published masterpiece, ready to break down what happened a quarter-century before.
Okay, and this is where the story gets really wild. As Galbraith is calmly up there, laying out the lessons of the past, warning about speculative fever, the stock market in New York starts to tumble. And I mean, hard. The very disaster he's describing seems to be happening all over again, in real time. By the time he finished speaking, the market had lost $3 billion in value. The media, of course, went into a complete frenzy, dubbing it the Galbraith break. I mean, can you imagine? His history lesson seemingly spooked the entire financial world. It is a perfect, terrifying introduction to the power of the ideas in his book. So, what was it about 1929 that Galbraith was trying to warn them about? To really understand the crash, first, you have to understand the incredible, almost unbreakable optimism that came right before it. The vibe was just off the charts. And you have to ask, who was leading the cheers? This wasn't just a few rogue speculators. No. The calls of confidence were coming from the very top. We're talking respected economists from Yale and Princeton, major institutions like the Harvard Economic Society, the Wall Street Journal, the big banks. They were the so-called exalted wise men, and their message was totally unanimous. This party is never going to end.
And this quote, this one has gone down in history as one of the most spectacularly wrong predictions of all time. It's from Professor Irving Fisher, one of the most famous economists of his day. And when did he say it? Just days before the entire market completely unraveled. You just can't make this stuff up.
A permanently high plateau. That was the belief, that was the dream. But as you can kind of see from the chaos here, that plateau was about to become a cliff. And when the collapse finally came, it wasn't some quick summer storm. Galbraith describes it as a typhoon. And that's the perfect word for it, right? It was this relentless, devastating force that just kept building and building day after day. The beginning of the end really came as a 1-2 punch. First, you had Black Thursday, just total panic selling. A group of powerful bankers actually managed to pool their money to stop the bleeding, but it turned out to be just a temporary fix, because 5 days later, on Black Tuesday, the floor just completely gave out. It was a tidal wave of selling, and this time, nothing and nobody could stop it.
Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand, and it's central to Galbraith's whole argument. Unlike other panics, this one didn't have a clear bottom. You see, in past crashes, once the selling stopped, it was pretty much over. But 1929 was different. The singular horror of it was that the worst just kept getting worse.
So think about that. It means that anyone who jumped back into the market in November 1929 thinking, hey, it's a fire sale, I'm getting a bargain, they got absolutely wiped out. The market just kept on its slow, painful slide for another 2 full years, eventually losing almost 90% of its value. 90%. And even the biggest names in the world couldn't stop the bleeding. You had John D. Rockefeller, a guy who almost never made public statements, coming out to try and restore confidence, but it was no use. As the comedian Eddie Cantor later joked, sure, who else had any money left? An event this huge is just bound to create some legends. And Galbraith, being the clear-eyed economist that he was really keen to separate all the dramatic myths from the grim reality. Let's tackle the most famous myth of all, ruined stockbrokers jumping from Wall Street windows.
We've all seen the images, we've all heard the stories. The reality, it just didn't happen. Not on any large scale. The suicide rate was actually pretty low in October and November of '29, and the few tragic cases that were linked to the crash almost never involved jumping from a window. It's a powerful image, for sure, but it's a false one.
And this leads us to Galbraith's most important and really game-changing argument. For years, the common wisdom among economists was that the crash was just a symptom of an already sick economy. Galbraith completely flipped that idea on its head. He argued the crash itself was the cause, a financial typhoon so powerful that it wrecked an otherwise salvageable economy and plunged the world into a decade of depression.
So why does a story from nearly a century ago still matter so much? Because for Galbraith, this book was never just about history. It was always about the future.
This is the core message. It's the whole reason he wrote the book, and it's why it's still so vital today. The forces that create these speculative bubbles, greed, the belief that you're somehow destined to get rich without doing any work, and of course, the comforting reassurances from all the experts, well, those are timeless parts of human nature.
Galbraith knew that the object of speculation changes. Back in his day, he suggested it could be uranium mines or real estate. And that leaves us with the big question for our own time. What's the modern equivalent? Where is that collective belief in a permanently high plateau building today? That is the enduring and truly urgent warning of 1929.